Or we're taught that love is loud, that if you want someone to see your worth, you have to say more, do more, explain more. But here's the contradiction. The more you over-explain your value, the more it quietly slips through your hands. Not because you aren't worthy, but because true worth isn't something that needs convincing. It's something that's felt in your presence, not your performance. Underneath this is an internal conflict many women carry. Do I show him how much I care? Or do I step back and risk him not noticing? But the real question, the mirror question is this. Who are you when you stop performing and simply stand in your truth? There's an emotional contrast at play here. On one side, emotional chasing, the proving, the apologizing, the shrinking. On the other, quiet dignity. Not cold, but calm. Not withdrawn, but rooted. And it's in that calm that your worth becomes unmistakable. Because real power isn't found in demanding to be seen. It's found in the silent actions that remind someone who you are, with or without their attention. Sometimes the loudest way to show your worth is to stop explaining it. When a woman feels unseen, unheard, or misunderstood in a relationship, her natural instinct, especially when she deeply cares, is often to do more. More explaining, more giving, more proving. And yet, paradoxically, it's this very effort that can create emotional distance. In our research at the Gottman Institute, we've seen this pattern unfold time and time again. The belief that connection is earned through overpressuring, when in reality, the most powerful expressions of worth are often silent. Let's break this down through the lens of relationship psychology and emotional patterns. First, let's talk about emotional flooding. This is what happens when your nervous system becomes overwhelmed by relational stress. It's not just emotional, it's biological. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing shortens, your ability to listen, think clearly, and respond with intention diminishes. So what do we often do when we're flooded? We reach, we explain, we chase clarity. But here's aha insight number one. When you're emotionally flooded, silence isn't withdrawal, it's regulation. Instead of reacting, try the silent action pause, like 60 seconds, put your hand on your heart, breathe. Not because silence is a punishment, but because clarity never comes from chaos. You show your worth by demonstrating that you value emotional responsibility. That's the kind of strength that builds trust, both with yourself and in a relationship. Next, bids for connection. In every relationship, we make small, everyday attempts to connect, a glance, a joke, a question, a touch. These are bids. In healthy partnerships, those bids are met, or at least acknowledged. But when you've been making bids and they go unanswered, maybe he doesn't text back, maybe he's distracted or dismissive, it's easy to feel invisible. Here's where many women overcorrect. They amplify the bids. More text, more effort, more vulnerability, hoping to provoke a response. But here's aha insight number two. Your worth doesn't grow in volume the more you repeat it. Try this instead, the silent action of disengaging with grace. Withdraw the bid, not from bitterness, but from wisdom. Allow space. When someone notices the absence of your energy, your presence, your care, your attention, they also begin to notice the value of it. Now let's look at love maps. This concept refers to how well we know our partner's inner world, their hopes, fears, daily stresses. When we invest in building love maps, we're emotionally attuned. But what happens when you've memorized his inner world and ignored your own? That brings us to our behavior insight healing loop. behavior. You keep showing up for his needs while yours go unmet. Insight, you've mistaken overgiving for emotional intimacy. Feeling, redirect that energy inward. Ask, what do I need to feel emotionally safe today? Then meet your own bid with care. Maybe it's rest. Maybe it's silence. Maybe it's turning off your phone for an evening and doing something that nourishes you. These acts might seem small, but they're profoundly silent ways to reclaim your emotional power. Let's not forget the four horsemen: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. These are the behaviors that predict relational breakdown. If you've been criticized or met with defensiveness or contempt, you might have learned to mute your needs to keep the peace. And here's a toxic pattern worth reframing. The belief that if you're easygoing enough, low minimal enough, quiet enough, you'll finally be loved. Let's reframe it. You were never too much. You were just trying to protect the parts of you that had gone unseen for too long. Silent action doesn't mean shrinking. It means becoming still enough to hear your own truth and brave enough to honor it. Agree. And finally, self-soothing and regulation. Your calm is your power. When you choose not to respond immediately, not to defend, not to perform, you're practicing emotional maturity. You are no longer handing your self-worth over to someone else's capacity to respond. That's the quietest and most profound form of confidence. So if you're wondering how to show him your true worth, don't start with a speech. Don't start with a plea. Start with these silent actions that whisper, I know who I am, and I no longer need to be loud to be heard, especially by myself. That's where dignity begins. And that's where connection, real, mutual, lasting connection, has a chance to grow. Her name was Rachel. Mid-30s, smart, self-aware, successful in the outside world. But inside her relationship, she felt like she was slowly disappearing. She had been with Daniel for a little over a year. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't absent, but he was inconsistent, hot, then cold, present, then distracted. One night, she was everything. The next, she was too much. And so she did what many women do when love feels just out of reach. She tried harder. She'd send the text that went unanswered, then follow it with another. She'd ask what was wrong when the silence stretched, then apologize for asking. She told herself she was just being communicative. That love required effort, that if she explained herself well enough, he'd finally understand. But she was exhausted. She didn't cry in front of him. She cried after the call ended in the middle of the kitchen with her back against the refrigerator. She didn't shout. She wrote long messages in her notes app and never sent them. She didn't beg, not exactly, but she waited every night for the text, the call, the small gesture that said, I still choose you. A night, something shifted. She had sent a voice note, soft, sincere, asking if they were okay. It had been 6 hours, then 10, then a full day. No reply. She picked up her phone again, thumb hovering over another message. She stared at the empty box, and instead of typing, she just sat. The air was still. The light from the hallway crept across the wooden floor, and something quiet rose up in her like a whisper. You don't have to keep trying to be enough for someone who's not showing up. She put the phone down, not in anger, not in protest, but with a kind of deep exhale that felt like a goodbye, not to him, but to the version of her that kept reaching. She took a shower, lit a candle, ate a meal that wasn't just snacks in front of her laptop. It was so small, so ordinary, but it was also sacred, because for the first time in months, she was no longer auditioning. And then the mirror moment, standing in the bathroom brushing her hair, she looked at herself and realized it was never that I was too much. It was that I kept offering all of me to someone who brought only half of themselves. She didn't get a text back that night or the next, but she didn't chase it because something had returned to her that she didn't know she'd lost. Her own attention, her own warmth. She didn't get him back, but she got herself back. Your true worth doesn't echo louder when someone finally sees it. It expands the moment you stop abandoning it yourself. One of the most powerful truths we've learned through decades of relationship research is this: the way you respond to yourself in moments of relational pain is just as important as how you respond to your partner. When you're not being met emotionally, when there's distance, silence, or inconsistency, your nervous system starts interpreting it as danger. It triggers what we call emotional flooding. Your heart rate increases. You feel urgency. You reach for reassurance. But in that state, you're not in connection. You're in survival. So how do you show your true worth without speaking, begging, or explaining? Let's explore 4 silent, emotionally intelligent tools that speak volumes, not to prove anything to him, but to return you to clarity, dignity, and peace within yourself. Tool 1, the 60-second pause before reacting. This is a regulation tool rooted in the physiological responses we've studied in our love lab. When emotional flooding occurs, your heart rate often goes above 100 BPM, impairing your ability to think logically or respond with intention. Reacting in this state often leads to reactivity instead of resolution. Try this tonight. The next time you feel the urge to send a message, explain your worth, or confront silence with noise, pause. Place one hand on your heart and the other on your stomach. Breathe deeply for 60 seconds. Count the inhale, count the exhale. Remind your body, I am safe. I am not being abandoned. I am regulating. This moment of silence isn't passive. It's protective and it's powerful. Tool 2, the 3-1 internal repair method. One of the foundational findings of our research is the magic ratio. In strong, healthy relationships, we see a minimum of 5 positive interactions for every negative 1. But when you're being emotionally neglected, that ratio disappears, and you may begin turning negative inward. To repair this imbalance, we recommend the 3-1 internal ratio. For every self-critical thought or emotional trigger, offer yourself 3 self-activations. For example, if the thought is, he hasn't texted me back, maybe I was too much, follow it with, I showed up with honesty. My feelings are valid even if they're not acknowledged. Someone else's silence does not define my worth. This tool is sacred because it slowly rewires the inner dialogue. You become your own emotional anchor. Tool 3, journal prompt. What did I give today that I didn't receive in return? This isn't about keeping score. It's about becoming conscious of energetic imbalances in your relationships. Overperfusement often happens because the imbalance has become normalized. When you take time each evening to reflect, what did I give today? What came back? You're not blaming, you're observing. And when you observe consistently, you begin making decisions from clarity instead of emotional exhaustion. This exercise helps you track patterns. If you gave empathy, time, forgiveness, or support, and received repeated avoidance or emotional dismissal, that pattern becomes visible. And with visibility comes choice. Tool 4, name it to tame it. This emotional labeling technique is simple but neurologically grounding. When you feel emotionally overwhelmed, name the core feeling, not the story, just the feeling. I feel rejected. I feel unseen. I feel anxious. When you name the emotion, studies in neuroscience, including our own clinical applications, show a measurable calming of the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. You gain access to your higher reasoning. You return to yourself in silence. Your worth doesn't disappear. It settles. It strengthens. You don't need to prove your value with performance. These practices, breath, reflection, self-discrimination, and emotional literacy, are silent declarations of your worth. When done consistently, they become not only actions, but a new emotional identity, one where you are no longer driven by fear of abandonment, but led by the quiet, grounded truth of your own value. There comes a point in a woman's emotional life where words stop working. You've explained, you've reasoned, you've poured your heart into text after text, trying to make him see you, and yet the silence on the other side says everything. You tell yourself, maybe I didn't say it right. Maybe I should have been softer. Maybe I should have waited longer before saying how I feel. But here's what the research and the heartbreak shows us. When you chronically overexpress to someone emotionally unavailable, you begin to abandon yourself in small, invisible ways. The exhaustion you're feeling, that's not just from him. It's from the emotional labor of constantly translating your worth into something someone else might value. And so today I want to offer you something quieter, something deeper, a truth that doesn't live in effort, but in stillness. Detachment is not punishment. Silence is not manipulation. When used consciously, they are sacred acts of self-respect. Because when you stop speaking into emotional vacancy, when you stop pleading to be chosen, something profound happens. You hear yourself again. Goosebump moment. A woman once told me, I used to check my phone 27 times a day, waiting for him to say something. One day I left it face down on the kitchen table and took a walk. No destination, no makeup, no need to be seen. And for the first time in months, I felt real. Not waiting, not performing, just real. What she did on that walk, silently, with no applause, was an act of profound emotional recalibration. As she stopped chasing, she started reclaiming. Here's the mirror truth I want to offer you. But if you weren't too much just unprotected, what if all those moments of neediness were actually signals from your nervous system saying, I'm carrying too much. I need safety. I need home. But instead of home, you kept knocking on a door that never opened, thinking that maybe if you knocked sweeter, softer, stronger, someone would finally let you in. Sometimes silence isn't empty. It's full of you, the part of you that's learning how to self-soothe, the part of you that's remembering how whole you actually are when you're not translating your soul into bite-sized, palatable pieces. So what do you carry forward? A new emotional stance. I don't explain my worth. I embody it, not through noise, not through over-efforting, but through small, grounded choices. Letting the message sit unsent. Letting his silence speak for itself. Letting yourself breathe before you beg. And in that space, your space, something will shift. Not because he finally sees you, but because you do. That's how you begin. 9 silent actions. But it only takes one moment, one still self-honoring moment to come home to yourself. You began this journey believing that love had to be explained, proven, chased, that silence meant defeat, that if he wasn't choosing you, maybe you just weren't enough yet, but now you know something truer. You know, that the most powerful thing you can do isn't to convince someone of your worth, it's to remember it quietly, deeply, without needing permission. The same silence that once felt like rejection is now a boundary, a shelter. And the over-explaining you once called connection, you now see it for what it was, self-abandonment in disguise. So the question shifts, not how do I make him see me, but what do I become when I see me? Because here's the truth. You don't speak louder to be valued. You become stiller to be seen, first by yourself. You are no longer a woman performing for love. You're a woman protecting her peace. You don't need to say everything to be understood. You just need to stop shrinking to be seen.